Hi there, my name is Sebastian DeRossi, Community Evangelist for CreateJS, and I'm here to get you up and running with CreateJS. In this video, I'm going to be creating a simple demo which will illustrate some of the capabilities of CreateJS. I'll start by showing you where to find the CreateJS libraries and how to incorporate them within your project. I'll then explain how to create a primitive shape and how to move that shape around. We will also explore how to interact with shapes via mouse events, and then how to add sounds to your project. Finally, I'll show you how to preload your assets so that they'll be ready to use when we need them. So let's get started. So before we go any further, I'd like to show you what our sample file will actually look like. As you can see, we have a simple shape going back and forth. We can interact with that shape. We can produce a sound and create a bunch of bitmap instances. So nothing too fancy here, but please keep in mind that this is just to show basic concepts. Here we're using EaselJS to create the shape. Give that shape motion with TweenJS, playing sounds with SoundJS, and using preload to preload the sound and our image. Okay, so now let's go get our classes. Head over to createjs.com. Here you'll find a lot of useful information such as API documentation and demo files. All of these are great resources to get you started with CreateJS. But what we're interested in is accessing the libraries. So to do that, click on the download button. Choose the CDN option. So we're going to access the libraries through the CDN as opposed to downloading the full source and copying it to your local file system. Using the CDN hosted versions of the libraries allows them to be downloaded quickly and cached across different sites, which can reduce bandwidth cost and page loading times. Here you'll see the different libraries that are hosted and the various versions of them. What we'll be doing is grabbing the URL, this top URL, and pasting it into our script tag. That way we'll have full access to all the libraries. Okay, let's start writing code. To do that, let's create an HTML file. Let's call it index. So the first thing that we'll want is access to our libraries. Copying the URL from our CDN page, we'll simply place that into our script tag. The next thing we'll want is to create our canvas. Giving it an ID of my canvas, giving it a width of 500, and a height of the same. So for whatever reason, if Canvas is not supported in our browser, we can simply write a little message. Alternative content. So to ensure that our libraries are loaded, we're going to listen for the onload event. And we'll give it a handler name of init. Within our script tag, we can create that function. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to want to do also is create a stage. Think of stage as a big root level container for all our display objects. Don't forget our namespace, and we'll call stage. The next thing we'll want to do is tie in our canvas to our stage. And to do that, we can simply use the ID that we just created of my canvas. All right, so now let's create our shape. All right, so now we can use the shapes instance of the graphics class. So we can just go ball.graphics.beginFill. And coming from a Flash AS3 background, you'll notice that these commands are very similar. And then we'll give it draw a circle, give it 0, and we'll give it a radius of 50. Now this is going to draw to the top left, so let's move it over. We can do that by using the X property. So we'll go 50, and we'll move it down so that we can really see it to 200. Now the next thing we're going to want to do is add this shape to our stage by using addChild. What addChild does is grabs that shape and adds it to the stage display list. So the last thing we need to do is we need to tell the stage to draw out its contents to the canvas. So we can simply say stage.update. All right, let's see what we have. There you go. Our shape is displayed. So the next thing we're going to want to do is to add some motion. To do that, we're going to use TweenJS. Now, with TweenJS, we're going to use the static get method. And to implement TweenJS, it's actually very simple. Remembering our namespace, go get, and the first parameter on get is our target. In this case, it's our ball. The second parameter is properties that we can set. So we're going to go ahead and set our loop. This is so that when we run our tween, it will just loop back to the beginning. So we are going to set our ball to move to 450, and we'll give it a duration of 300. Excuse me, of 3 seconds. Now we can take advantage of our chaining methods, just like we did with our shape when we were using the drawing API. Now we can set this to 50 and give it the same 3 seconds. Now the next thing we'll want to do is constantly update the stage to show this actual motion. For that, we'll be using the ticker class. And what the ticker class is basically setting an interval and broadcasting that out. So to use that, we'll use our ticker. We'll listen for an event called tick and assign it a function or a handler function. So we'll just call it tick as well. And we will move our update, and we should be good. Let's see what we have. There you go, some motion. Pretty easy. Alright, so the next thing I wanted to show you is mouse interaction. Now we want to interact with our actual display object, which is our shape, our ball. To do that, we can take advantage of the fact that every display object in EaselJS can listen for a click event. So we can just simply add event listener, click, and we can just give it a function called handle click. And right now we're just going to display to the console that we've actually clicked. Let's see what we have. So I'll bring up the console. So every time I click, you'll see that that gets updated. Okay, now let's add some sound. You'll notice that in the Assets folder, I have a sound here, and this is the sound that we'll be using, a simple pop sound. We'll be interacting with our shape to produce the sound. Now, how do we get sound to work? The first thing that we're going to want to do is to register the sound. So, using our namespace, sound.register sound. The first parameter that we supply is the actual path. And an ID. Now, the benefits for using register sound is that it will load the sound immediately. It won't play it, but it will kick off the load. The next thing we can do is know when our sound is complete or when it's load complete. So you can just go add event listener, and we can listen for load complete. And we can assign it an event handler. Handle complete. So ideally, we want our sound to be loaded, because if we try to play the sound with it not being loaded, we can run into problems. So we don't want that. So what we're going to do is actually grab all this stuff and let's put it on our handle complete method. All right, so we have our sound loaded. Now what we want to do is have our click play our sound. So to do that, we can get rid of this console log and go create.sound, and we'll use the play method. And all we need to do is supply it the ID when we registered the sound. Let's see what we have. So we're moving, that's good. And when we click the shape, we get our sound. Cool. So because we're only managing one sound at the moment, this is a totally acceptable way of adding sound to your project. But what if you have a bunch of sounds? So let's say instead of 1, we have 20. It's going to be very difficult to manage using our current setup. So this is why PreloadJS will help us out. To do that, what we'll use is the load queue class. So to do that, let's create an instance of the queue class, or the load queue class. We'll go queue equals new using our namespace. Load queue. So what is load queue? Well, it's the main API for preloading content. It's basically a loading manager that maintains a single file or a queue of many. It also has a plugin architecture to process and load content. So what we're going to do is, because we're going to preload sound, we'll actually use an install plugin passing it our sound class. So to do that, we'll just go q.install plugin. We'll pass it our sound class. And we'll also want to listen for when all of our assets that we're going to preload, our image and our sound, are ready. So we listen for a complete. So we'll go q add event listener complete, and we might as well use our handle complete. Now, to set up the files that we want to preload, we simply use the load manifest method, and that method accepts an array of objects that we are going to supply. So you'll see. So q dot load manifest. So this takes an array. We'll pass it a generic object with an ID. We'll say, we'll load first our image. We'll give it an ID and a source. Source will be our path. So assets / daisies.png. And then we'll pass our sound. So we'll call the ID sound, and we'll give it a source. All right. So a very simple setup. So when we're complete with all of our assets, we'll call handle complete, which will draw our shape and move our shape. And when we click on that shape, we can simply reference the ID that we gave it, or we can even use the path name. But the other thing that I want to do is actually display that image. So I'm going to use an instance of our bitmap class. So to do that, we can create a bitmap and bring our namespace. We can get our results from our instance, and we can use the ID of our image, which is Daisy. And so let's just set it randomly on the stage. So we can set its x to math.random 500. And don't forget to add it to the display list stage. So go add child and our bitmap. Okay, let's see what we have. All right, so far so good. So if we click, I probably messed up something. All right. So what I forgot to mention, because we are loading our images locally, we're getting this error. This is because by default, the loadQ class will try to load its contents using XHR. To have your images loading locally, simply pass a false to the loadQ constructor. Let's see what we have. Okay, so far so good. If we click, it's going to work as expected. All right, so the last thing I wanted to talk about was resources. So, of course, the best resource is CreateJS.com. Here you'll find information about every library and the demo files that they have, even documentation. The next place to look is on community. So here you can ask questions, and most likely you will get a response, either by the support staff or by other users of the site. Another place is the blog. So it's simply blog.createjs.com. This will give you information on what's new and what's happening with CreateJS. You can also follow us on Twitter. So that does it for this video tutorial. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, either on the forum or send us an email. All right, thank you for listening, and good luck with whatever you guys are going to build with CreateJS. Also, don't forget to show us if you guys built something really cool.